Hello and welcome to another episode of The Identity Navigator. There is a moment, usually late at night, when a senior developer logs into a prod server with root access because they can, not because they need to, but because they feel responsible or irreplaceable or maybe just powerful. Welcome to Hello, I'm Root, an episode about when entitlement becomes ego and when technical privileges turn into a cultural vulnerabilities. We talk a lot about zero trust, just in time access, least privilege. But none of that really matters if your systems are designed around personalities instead of policies. If access becomes a badge of honor, not a tool to get work done, then we have already lost. In this episode, I am breaking down why over entitlement persists even in mature IAM programs, what ego driven access looks like under the hood, and how we can replace hero culture with systems thinking. Because if your IAM model relies on trusting someone not to misuse root, you don't have a model, you have a hope. Let's get into it. You know, it's funny. Being the senior developer with direct root access is a total badge of honor. It feels cool, like being that mysterious hacker in the movies, one with the black hoodie, or even like how smoking was seen back in the 70s. Think about it. In the old days, lighting up a cigarette was the ultimate symbol of being edgy or in the know. But here is what's fascinating. Over the years, smoking didn't become uncool because people were just told to stop. Instead, it was a slow, intentional shift, ads, social cues, and little changes in rules that made it less glamorous and more awkward. Eventually, the image flipped. Now, most folks see smoking as something that is dated or even kind of sad. So, what if we applied that same cultural shift in tech? Imagine if direct root access stopped being the rockstar move and started to be seen as a sign you are not keeping up with best practices. Maybe it's like saying, if you need the master key for everything, are you really an expert or are you missing something? What companies could do is run their own cultural campaigns, not wagging their fingers, but gradually turning root access into something that isn't cool anymore. Maybe it's even just a little embarrassing. And in a few years, the real sign of mastery isn't who's got all access, but who builds systems so well they rarely need it. I think that's powerful. A quiet cultural nudge that changes the whole vibe. But let's look into the identity of root. Access isn't just a technical capability, it's a story we tell ourselves about trust, about value, about who we are. There is a line that I hear a lot. I need this access to do my job. It sounds reasonable, rational, even responsible. But if you dig just a little deeper, you'll find something else, a deeply emotional attachment to control. In many teams, admin access like root, global admin, database super user isn't just a permission set, it's a status symbol, it's a rite of passage. It's how you know you have made it, you are trusted, you are senior, you are core. And slowly, without anybody noticing, access becomes identity, it becomes status. I once worked for a manufacturing company with a team where 5 engineers had persistent root access to production. When I asked how often they actually used it, they said all the time. Emergencies happen. So we checked the logs. In the last 90 days, there had been exactly one session where elevated access was used. And even that could have been handled via a ZIT token or a just in time token. There is a sociological and psychological theory that explains how individuals internalize the roles they occupy. Example, engineers or admin into their self concept. The more central a role is to someone's identity, the more emotionally disruptive it is to lose the symbol or privileges tied to that role. Here is the thing, people weren't holding on to access because they needed it, they were holding on because they felt like they have earned it. I built this system. I've been here since day one. They trust me with root. I've been with this company for 12 years. This is a classic role identity theory. When someone sees their job title and their system access as one and the same, taking that access away doesn't feel like risk reduction, it feels like personal rejection. The psychology of access is messy because, in the absence of strong systems, people start tying self worth to super user status. And then there is a hero culture. You have seen this too. That one person who logs in at 2 a.m., restarts the right service, patches the DB, and saves the day. Everyone claps, everyone is grateful, but no one asks the hard question, why does it always take this one person? There is a psychological construct where an individual's personal identity becomes deeply intertwined with a group or cause. This fusion creates a strong sense of oneness, making the person more likely to engage in extreme acts to protect or uphold that identity, especially in high stakes or high trust environment. When access becomes about being the hero, you stop designing systems that are resilient and start building systems that depend on individuals. If your uptime depends on one person's terminal, your incident response isn't a playbook, it's a prayer. There is also identity fusion at play here. The hero isn't just saving the system, they are the system. And that kind of emotional entanglement makes it nearly impossible to build guardrails without triggering resistance. And here is the most uncomfortable part. Some people fear losing access not because they want to misuse it, no, but because without it they feel powerless, invisible, replaceable. There is a cognitive bias where people assign greater values to things merely because they own them. In security context, this explains why individual may resist giving up rarely used access. It feels more valuable simply because it's theirs. And I get it. I have been there. Access gives us the ability to act, to fix, to prove our worth. But when that becomes the reason we hold on to it, when access becomes a security blanket, we stop acting in the interest of the system and start protecting our ego. Psychology calls this the endowment effect. We overvalue what we already have, especially when it signals seniority or control. And even when unused access starts to feel like a right we are entitled to, not a risk we are managing. This isn't about blaming individuals, it's about calling out a cultural pattern that's been hiding in plain sight. Root should never be personal. It's not a badge of honor. It's not a rite of passage. It's not your identity. It's a tool, and like all tools, it should be temporary, minimal, and auditable. Because the moment you tie your identity to entitlement, you weaken both the person and the system they operate in. Now, let's look at what this actually looks like under the hood. Security logs don't lie, but they do sigh loudly when they see what we are doing with access. Let's talk about what happens after someone has tied their identity to admin rights. It doesn't just sit there silently, it leaks into architecture, logs, and human behavior like a bad config in a Terraform file no one wants to touch. The eternal admin and Active Directory. You run net group domain admins and wait, why is Karen in here? She left the org in 2019. This is your classic infinite admin syndrome. No one wants to remove access because they might come back. She built the AD structure. What if something breaks? Spoiler, everything is already broken. That's why we are still using Active Directory. But I digress. IAM policies sometimes read like fan fictions. You check your AWS IAM and you find a role like ever seen an IAM role in AWS with a name like Emergency Admin 2020? It's 2025, but that role is still around. And guess what? It has full access to everything: S3 buckets, Lambda, EC2, the works. You ask why it is still active, and someone says, we used it during that production outage just in case we ever need it again. That is not just legacy, that is ego insurance. A golden key we are too afraid to delete because someone might get blamed if we do. On another policy named legacy admin role with backup access. Why the backup? Just in case the other God mode role doesn't work. This is cloud privilege hoarding, a sort of digital doomsday bunker. And like most bunkers, no one knows what's inside, but everyone is afraid to clean it out. And audit logs shows users logging in every few days, but not doing anything. This is logging in just to feel something. They escalate access, open a few screens, they log in, no access, no changes, just vibes. We've heard about vibe coding a lot. This is vibes administration. This is not work. This is a digital dopamine hit. Access as comfort food, the admin console as a weighted blanket. Then there is this no expiry, no limits, no memory. You know the type of access I'm talking about. No expiry date, no recertification. Granted through some email thread that's older than most interns. Don't worry, there is a Jira ticket. Right. In a project that was archived back when Tiger King was trending, this isn't malicious. It's just privilege by inertia. Access that stuck around because no one remembered to undo it. Call it what it is: entropy with root access. Then you have the just call me access model. You lock something down thinking you are making progress, and then someone says, if anyone needs access, just call me. I'll jump in and fix it. What you have built isn't a secure system, it's a trust based access broker with a pager. This isn't least privileged. This is privileged by personality, where access depends on who you know, not what you need. When your IAM model runs on memory and goodwill, you don't have IAM or identity management. You have an oral tradition in a Slack channel. Access isn't granted based on roles or policies. It's granted based on relationships and availability, turning security into a game of who you can reach, not what you are authorized to do. And then you have this model of vault access that's more crowded than Slack. Secret vaults like CyberArk or HashiCorp that contains one password, 17 users, and zero rotation events in 2 years. Just because you have it in a vault doesn't make it secure if 17 users have access to that vault. This is the shared toothbrush model of privileged access. Gross, convenient, and absolutely a bad hygiene. Then you have this CI/CD pipelines that ship root. Or here is another one. The built pipelines they need to deploy a static website, but somehow the service account it uses has permissions to shut down the company's cloud database. Why? Because it was easier during testing. That's not deployment. That's accidental super user cosplay. And it is how convenience gets mistaken for competence. Then you have your bots with more power than people, service accounts with global admin in Azure, full S3 access, and a hard coded password last rotated in the Obama administration. But when you suggest scoping it down, but it's a bot, it needs everything. No, Steve, it doesn't need everything. It's sending Slack alerts, not launching satellites. All of these symptoms of the same disease: access without design, entitlement without accountability, and most importantly, ego embedded into infrastructure. We don't fix this with more tools, we fix it by rewriting the stories behind these roles, by making responsible access feel just as powerful as persistent access. Because when you normalize root, you create a world where everyone has it, no one needs it, and no one knows who is responsible when something goes wrong. So let's look into how do we audit root and how we turn intuition into visibility. All of us know you can't fix what you don't see. Now, this might sound like a cliche, but in IAM, it's the gospel truth, especially when it comes to root access and over entitlement. Why auditing root access is so hard? Because it isn't just a permission level, it's a mindset, a feeling of power. And because it's so sensitive, it's often invisible in plain sight. It's the kind of thing where you think you know who has it, but when you actually dig into the logs, you find surprise guests lurking in the shadows. So, how do you catch root over entitlement because before it becomes a headline? The answer is you don't guess, you query. So let's say in an Active Directory, you have to run a weekly report of privileged groups and filter out inactive users. Something like list all domain admins who haven't logged in for 90 days. If they are not active, why do they still have keys to the kingdom? Then in cloud platforms like AWS, Azure, or GCP, look for IAM roles and services or service accounts with unrestricted permissions that haven't been used in months. For example, find all roles with wildcard permissions that were last used more than 60 days ago. Then you look at your audit logs, you analyze login patterns. Frequent logins without actions can indicate just checking in, behavior, or privileged hoarding. Spot these phantom admins who love the feeling of power but don't do actual work. Access reviews. Obviously, this is a no-brainer. Use built-in IAM platform signals to trigger automatic access certification. If a system flags a user who hasn't used an entitlement in 6 months, kick off a review. If no justification, remove it. Building dashboards that tell the story. Raw data is overwhelming. Logs can be thousands of lines of cryptic message. So here is the secret sauce. Build dashboards that visualize risk. Give your executives and tech teams a clear, real-time picture of who really has access to root level access. Example, you can use something like a heat map of stale privileged accounts colored by last login time. Or you can show trend charts showing the growth or shrinkage of privileged users over time. And you can set up alerts when new root level entitlements are created without corresponding tickets or approvals. Imagine your IAM dashboard as your root access crime board, complete with photos, sticky notes, and red flags everywhere. But thankfully, no actual strings compliance frowns on them. When you spot a surge in inactive admins or forgotten root roles, it is like catching the culprit nervously lurking just out of sight. So, visibility is the first step to control. You can't rely on intuition or trust alone. You need cold, hard data, and you need to turn that data into actionable insights. Because the worst root access isn't the one someone misuses, it's the one no one even knows exists. But how do we flip the culture? How do we make responsible access feel just as powerful as persistent access? Spoiler alert, it's not just about policies, it's about changing the story. So, how do we replace ego with systems? We started with this. Remember when smoking was cool? It was everywhere in movies, ads, even the office. A badge of belonging, a symbol of being part of the in crowd. Fast forward a few decades, and smoking is now largely uncool and even taboo. It went from mainstream to outcast because society changed the story around it. It became about health, accountability, and consequences. Root access today is a lot like smoking back then. A badge of honor for some engineers, a symbol of power and indispensability. I am the root admin. That means I am the hero. But just like smoking, that ego driven entitlement comes with a hidden cost, security risks, operational debt, and cultural toxicity. So you have to redesign access. You have to use temporary, just in time, minimal access. What if we could make root access uncool? What if having permanent root was just like smoking, a habit we actively discourage? This is what just in time and least privilege comes in. because it's about the temporary access. So instead of handing out permanent root keys, grant time limited permissions that automatically expires. Then you have just in time elevation, where engineers request elevated access only when needed with approvals and audit trails. And you have minimal access, grant only the permissions necessary to perform the tasks, no more and no less. Now, architectures that support privileged elevation with accountability, you could use any of these four that we talk about. We'll start with privileged access workstations or PAWS, which isolate admin activities in secure, monitored environment. You could use just-in-time PAM solutions like CyberArk or Beyond Trust, which automate access grants, approvals, and session recordings. You could use multi-party approval workflows where elevations require at least two approvers, reducing reliance on a single hero or heroine. You could also use real-time auditing and alerts where any elevation triggers logs and notification, making misuse visible instantly. Now also look into the human design of trust without root. And here's the secret. Engineers do not need permanent root to feel trusted or valued. Trust can be built through transparent policies and clear accountability. Give engineers tools and workflows that make temporary access effortless and fast. Celebrate responsible behavior. Highlight wins from using minimal access, JIT elevation, and audit compliance. And then there is the part that most companies struggle with, which is the cultural transformation about changing the story. Just like smoking lost its glamour through public health campaign and social shifts, root access culture can change. Now the goal isn't to strip engineers of their power, but it's to channel that power into systems that keep everyone safer and more effective. So let's design systems where root access is the exception, not the rule, where ego makes way for process and trust is built on accountability, not badges. Now, let me leave you with this. When smoking was everywhere in movies, ads, offices, and it was seen as cool, even a badge of belonging, it wasn't just a habit, it was part of the culture, a symbol of power or rebellion. But over time, public health campaigns didn't just tell people smoking was bad. They changed the story. They made smoking uncool, something that threatened your health, your image, and your future. It became socially unacceptable. Root access culture is not so different. For many, holding permanent root is like Marlboro Man, a symbol of heroism, indispensability, and control. I am the root admin. I am the one who saves the day. But this kind of ego driven entitlement creates hidden risks and operational debt. Just like quitting smoking is hard, breaking the grip of permanent root access is tough too, especially when just call me models and unchecked permissions make it easy to cling to that power. The good news, we can make root access uncool too by designing systems that favor just in time access, automatic revocations, multi-party approvals, and continuous auditing. We can build a culture where root is the exception, not the rule. And trust. It doesn't come from privileged, permanent privileges. It comes from transparent policies, shared accountability, and empowering engineers with secure temporary access when they need it. The goal isn't to strip away power, but to channel it through systems that protect everyone. Because just like kicking a bad habit, breaking over entitlements require more than rules. It demands a cultural shift, a shift where responsible access is celebrated, not resented. Where the real heroes are the one who used least privilege, follow approval workflows, and keep the whole team safe. And that's the challenge and the opportunity for us in IAM today to change the story around root access and in doing so, change the security culture for the better. Now, how to run a campaign that makes people want to give up access, which is a mouthful, or root access. Reframe the narrative from privilege to responsibility. People don't just give up power because you tell them to. They need a reason that connects to their identity and values. Position least privileged as a badge of professionalism and trustworthiness, not a loss of stature. Celebrate employees who follow best practices and highlight the risk of holding unnecessary access without finger pointing. Use social proof and positive reinforcement. Showcase stories of teams or individuals who reduced their privileges and the positive impact it had. Faster audits, fewer incidents, smoother workflows. Peer recognition programs or internal shoutouts can reinforce the behavior. Gamify the process. Turn access cleanup into a challenge or competition with rewards for the most improved teams or individuals. Leaderships, badges, or access detox milestone can make it fun. I personally love the idea of access detox. Make it easy and low friction. Provide clear, simple tools and workflows for people to review and relinquish access. Automate reminder and approvals to reduce the cognitive load. And then tie it to career growth and performance. Link adherence to access policies with performance reviews, promotions, or even bonus structures. Show how being a security champion can boost their career. None of this is possible without leadership buy in and modeling. When executives and team leads openly reduce their own privileges and talk about why, it sets a powerful example. Because remember, culture starts at the top. And then transparent metrics and communication. Regularly share progress metrics about reduced access and improved security posture. Make the impact visible and tangible. So, some of the real world examples could be Microsoft Security Champions program actively involves engineers in ownership of security practice, includes access management, and rewarding those who demonstrate good behavior. Google's internal culture around least privilege includes automated systems that flag unused privilege and nudge engineers to clean up, paired with strong cultural messaging. And my favorite, some organizations run access detox campaign modeled after public health initiatives that encourage voluntary privilege reduction with playful branding and clear benefits. So you can absolutely create a campaign so compelling that people want to voluntarily give up unnecessary access, but it takes a holistic approach, narrative change, social proof, incentives, leadership examples, and smart tooling. In the next section, let's look into how trust isn't a role and it's a risk decision. As we wrap up, let's get to the heart of what this all means. Trust in IM is not a job title, a role, or a badge of honor. Trust is risk decision, a calculated choice based upon evidence, context, and controls. If some of you must be familiar with assurance level, that is more or less what I'm talking about here. Challenging the myth of the trusted admins. For too long, IM programs have leaned on the idea of trusted admins, individuals who inherently deserve broad standing access because of their role or seniority. But trust isn't static or automatic. It cannot be granted once and forgotten. When trust is baked into a role rather than continuously validated, it creates a dangerous blind spot. We are not in the business of blind trust. We are in the business of earned and verified trust. Now, what a future without standing root access looks like, since this is an audio podcast, you can, unless you are driving, close your eyes and imagine an I am word. Also, if you are on a treadmill, don't please close your eyes. But if you are in a position to close your eyes and imagine an I am word where no one holds permanent root access by default. Access is granted just in time with clear expiration and approval workflows. Automated tool continuously validate access against policies and real-time behavior. Every privilege is transparent, auditable, and tied to business need. not personality, not ego. This isn't sci fi, it's a future many organizations are already close to building. Now, how to get there? What is the roadmap forward? Adopt system thinking. Build IM programs around policies, automation, and continuous visibility, not individuals. Replace entitlement with accountability. Shift culture to reward least privileged and responsible access stewardship. Invest in tools and analytics. Use real time data, behavior analytics, and auditing to detect and reduce over entitlement. Drive cultural change. Lead by example. Break the hero mindset and celebrate those who do access right. Last but not the least is question everything. Constantly challenge assumptions about who needs that access and why. If your security depends on trusting someone not to misuse root, you don't have a security model. You have a hope. And I am teams, it's time to challenge that myth. It's time to dismantle the culture of over entitlement and build systems that protect your organization, no matter who is at the keyboard. Trust isn't a role, it is a risk decision, and the better your design, the stronger your security. Here's the truth: holding permanent root access because I am trusted is like saying I can keep the office keys on me 24/7 even when I am asleep because I am responsible. Confidence is great unless you trip over your own feet. In IAM, we don't need superheroes. We need systems that work even when humans don't. Because security isn't about who wants the keys, it's about making sure no one accidentally orders pizza to the whole company or locks everyone's out. And that is a risk decision, not a popularity contest. Time to rethink root access because someone hits reply all by mistake. Thank you for listening and for taking this journey with me. You can always reach out to me via LinkedIn or send me an email at theidentitynavigator@gmail.com. Both of these info I'll put in the show notes. Until next time, this is Rohit, your identity navigator.